I went to see John Carpenter live, and I received this as my pass, the Obey Consume Pass.
Nice.
This meant that I was able to meet Mr. Carpenter.
That's hilarious.
And tell him how much I loved him. And I got this shirt here, too. I don't actually have a They Live shirt, but I have an In the Mouth of Madness shirt and a Thing shirt.
Okay.
And, I just... He's one of my favorite directors.
Right,
so
yes. I know. If you know Kyle, you know that it's just one of his favorites. Oh, yes.
Yeah, he's the only director in my horror realm that I have 2 movies for. I try not to pick 2 for one filmmaker, but I have 2 in my top 10 for him. And this isn't one of them, but got very close in my ranking. We're going to be talking about the B movie that's intentional?
The intentional B movie
with
of
some A movie ideas?
88, right?
Yeah.
88 was a great year for horror movies.
Yeah, so join us as we put on some sunglasses and get talking about They Live. Welcome back to the show. I'm one of your hosts, Kyle Goethe from GoatFilmReviews.com.
Hey, I'm Nick from the St. Paul Filmcast. Thanks again for finding us. Thanks again for watching. And for our loyal fans, thank you for continued support of the show. Hey, we're on Twitter and Instagram. You can follow us that way. Reach out to us that way. Today we're going to talk about a classic from 1988. I think 88 was a great year for horror movies, and this is another staple of why it's so great. It's They Live.
Yeah. So Drifter Nada has moved from place to place, working odd jobs and sleeping on the streets.
No name. Right, he's a drifter.
For some time now, and when he receives a special pair of sunglasses, he discovers a horrific truth. Our world is surrounded by beings who live among us and control us through subliminal messages. Using these sunglasses, Nada attempts to wake up those around him to what's going on, but he may be too late.
So, subliminal messaging in advertising has been around, I think, since the 50s. Even Kubrick was a little bit obsessed with this notion.
Mad Men made the whole
Mad Men and everything. So it's always been implied. You can find a couple ads where there was subliminal messaging in the advertising, and that was a great psychological thing that happened in the 50s and 60s. And I think John Carpenter kind of knew about it and wanted to submit it into this story.
Yeah, it's an odd choice because, it's based on a short story that has some very light parallels. Like, very, very light, because it's like an 8-page short story. It's a very short piece. Right, yeah. Elements were drastically changed. Carpenter embraced the B-movie aspects of it, and I think he knew that because he knew he was working with a pretty low budget, and he had a lot of big ideas. So, you can't really get them across in a completely cut-and-dry, clean way.
And then your star player is a professional wrestler.
So I think that's what part of it is. He's embracing the 80s action hero, bringing someone in who's had no acting experience, and kind of getting him to roll with the punches. And it's a very weird movie because it has such A movie ideas, but it's done in a B movie style.
It's so 80s, but there's a lot of 50s stuff.
Oh yeah,
it's very much that overlap. We were back in the 50s kind of a thing, Night of the Creeps kind of stuff.
I was thinking about Night of the Creeps when I was watching it again, and I think part of it, too, is with the glasses that show you a black and white world. They kind of show you, in their simplest black and white, how things actually are. But then also they have this kind of throwback style of we're going to throw our ideas right at your face, Yeah.
So I like that Rowdy Piper. Is the star, which when we were kids were like, what? And is it a wrestling movie? No, it's a horror movie. What?
Yeah.
So I was loving when this came out. But, of course, in the mid '80s, you probably would know in the playgrounds and when the recess, we were probably I'm Jimmy Superfly. No, I'm Rowdy. and Bobby Slam. So we all knew who Rowdy Piper was, and that was the one thing that we didn't recognize is this. Why is this a wrestler, but it's not a wrestling thing? Of course, that's a line that he wanted to use in wrestling, the bubble gum.
Oh, yeah.
He wanted to use that in a wrestling thing, and then John's put it in.
Well, I think part of it, it's weird because John Carpenter, he's a guy who he likes to interact with other people, but he kind of has, this is the movie we're making. He's kind of a little hard and dry on that, too, but, when you earn the respect that he has, he'll play with you. Kurt Russell and him, not so much a strained relationship on their first movie, but they definitely, as they made more movies together, there was that interplay where they figured each other out. And it seems like he hit that with Roddy Piper almost instantly. He didn't seem bothered by the fact that Roddy Piper wanted to wear his wedding ring, even though his character had no information about being married. It never comes up, but he's wearing a wedding ring the whole movie because Roddy Piper didn't want to take it off. And then it also, the film, of course, it led to the fracture between Piper and Vince McMahon. McMahon did not want him to do the movie. And he said, I tell you what, I'll get you a wrestling movie. I'll get you a movie made by us that will be like your star vehicle. And he said, no, I'm working with John Carpenter.
I remember that story of him.
Yeah.
I'll just keep laying hundreds on the table till you say no to this movie, Rowdy. And Rowdy's like, no, I actually buy it in the whole. I'm just a drifter looking for a job.
Yeah,
right?
and I think that there's a lot of that Piper Carpenter interplay throughout the whole narrative, which I think is so fascinating.
Yes. So right, and then I love the costuming. It's so 80s. It's got the mullet and everything. Mm-hmm. But the funny thing is, you'll recognize how big of a guy he is. In the wrestling world, when we watch wrestling, he was kind of a small person.
Yeah.
But then you realize when he's hanging around with other people how big of a guy.
He looks like the action figures of the wrestlers, where it's like kind of like they have like the comically over large muscle. Even the action figures would have bigger muscles than the wrestlers themselves.
That's right.
Because they had to look like Stretch Armstrong, and he kind of had that like look of when he would enter a scene, he stands out like a sore thumb, and that's kind of what makes you laugh. It makes you kind of recognize the silliness. Yeah. But then while you're doing that, it's almost like Carpenter is subliminally feeding you his ideals as you're watching this generally cheesy movie.
And they got a little bit of ending that's close to Life Stinks.
Yeah.
That's kind of similar to Mel Brooks' Life Stinks, which we critiqued before.
Yeah.
But definitely, is it a real authentic horror movie, or is this like a psychological horror movie? Because there's so much action involved. It's more of an action movie than anything.
I would say if you didn't have the creature design, it would be hard to place it as a horror movie. But I think the creatures are so disturbingly weird, and even again like cheap. Right. They look cheap. Their muscles like don't really move right when they're talking. It's something where like they look so creepy, and they're on that poster, that excellent poster with the glasses, and he sees the creature through them. I think that without that, it'd be hard for me to say horror, but it just feels so like these monsters are disturbing, and having them pop up in society, like the old woman formaldehyde face, or especially the ending during the sex scene, is one of the most like kind of like laugh out loud moments to have in like an ending for your horror-ish movie.
Yeah, so it wraps up very nice. We're talking about Rowdy, of course, he's a headline in, but then you have a lot of great other characters like Keith David, who's worked with, we talked about The Thing. Yeah. But also did the voice of Spawn. Mm-hmm. And I don't know if he was trained as a stunt guy before they did this, if I remember the notes, but he was all in of doing this stunt thing.
Yeah. They worked it out together, it sounds like. From what I had heard, I heard this rumor story. I don't know if I have much credence to it, but I think it's interesting enough to tell. That like Carpenter had them both over to his home to like practice the scene, and so they were in like the backyard. And the scene was supposed to be like a 90-second fight. Yeah. And they just kept going and kept adding more elements to it. And he was like, all right, we'll shoot that.
Shoot it.
And it's, again, that fight scene has been parodied in South Park. They have the two handicapped kids have a fight, and Cartman wants to go tell everyone about it. And it's a shot-for-shot remake of that fight in South Park. Like, so it's become an iconic sense for how, like, over the top it goes, and how it ultimately doesn't mean much to the narrative.
No, but right, we always talked about with films, what are you winning with? Well, if Rowdy Piper is a wrestler,
if you don't have a fight scene in the movie at all,
if you don't have a fight scene, it's like you're missing out on a great opportunity. It's like if you find somebody that can dance, and knows how to dance, put them in the movie. But right, that's what's catching about it. We talk about the movies. Where are you winning? We'll use that. Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. Yeah,
and you also get.
I get exhausted watching every time.
Like, and as it goes on, I think my wife has never seen the movie all the way through. She's caught glimpses as she's kind of walking through the room and stuff. Like and she happened to catch the fight last night, and she was like, "Is this still going?" Like she wasn't really paying attention, but she all of a sudden realized they're still fighting, and we don't know how much time has passed. And she's like, "Have I fallen asleep? Are you watching it again? Like, is this still happening?" And that's kind of how I felt watching the movie for the first time too. Is it's, it's a where you're winning situation, and it plays into, again, those B-movie aesthetics of, like, almost like padding the runtime, but then, like, again, having, like, a smart script, having a smart story to tell. It's one of the most captivating ideas that only a director like John Carpenter, someone who has such a clear vision, could pull off.
Right, and then I think he did it, like, low scale, kind of like Alfred Hitchcock did with Psycho, but he did this with They Live. Mm-hmm. Just really, with skeleton budget, skeleton crew.
And I know he had Universal with him. But Universal was not, like, they were not really.
Well, I don't think he got permits for this. I think they just went gonzo on the site, like, just shoot it.
I would assume, like, most of, like, the scenes on the street, like, without the gun, I guess. I would assume everything was done pretty.
Right, yeah.
And I know that they got
a phone call from the county with that, yeah.
They got actual homeless people to play the extras in the background. And Piper later said, like, he goes, that was something I actually, was one of the first things I realized about Carpenter was he paid these people, like, a working wage. Like what they were supposed to get as extras on set, and he also provided them with free food during production so that they would not go hungry. And Piper was like, see, that's the kind of thing that we don't think about when we talk about horror film directors, is like we think they're all these like disturbing weird dudes that live in their basement and talk horror stuff, and it's like some of them are the most friendly people, most respectful people of the ones around them. And Carpenter's always been kind of a curmudgeon, but he's respectful. I guess.
Well, because you're constantly fighting for your vision, right?
Yeah.
And then people like want to alternate change. I understand as a director, like you have a clean cut, this is what you want to do, and then people try to get input, which is, essentially what you want.
Mm-hmm.
Other people you're working, it's a collaboration. But sometimes you have to be still stubborn and be like, no, this has to be this way.
Yeah.
And I think he's kind of like that.
And the problem was it almost seemed like every movie he made, especially during this period, was 5 to 10 years ahead of its time. Where like it was not recognized as the classic it was.
This is like Network, but with, I'm sorry to interrupt. This is like Network with horror movie. This is so ahead of its time that people are like, you're just making fun of 50s camp movies with a wrestler. You're just trying to make cheap money with using a wrestler.
Yeah, and it's because it tackles things like how something that should be obvious. The rich people are always taking advantage of the poor people, and that's essentially what our aliens are coming here to do. Is they even talk about at the end with Buck Flowers, where he's like, "It's just a business thing, man. Like we're not here to take over. We're here to just make some money and have a good time."
Which is really bizarre because I think this came out after Alienation.
Maybe.
Yeah.
I have trouble placing Alienation because I always think of the show instead of the movies. But I think it was a couple years afterwards.
Yeah, I think Alienation came out in the fall, and then this came out like really late fall.
Yeah. And I can see it not working for everyone because it's a movie you almost have to embrace. The first time I saw it, I remember thinking, this is just really weird. Like there's something about it that brought me back to it. But I remember being kind of like, I don't get what you're trying to do with the style that you're doing in this kind of a substance movie.
You had to be a teenager in the 50s to find all those B movies and movie drive-ins. But and the music is like anticipation. It's just walking in the street like, is somebody gonna mess with him already?
Yeah.
Right.
It's got that.
He's already looking for trouble, right?
It almost feels reminiscent of like if you did a sci-fi version of Morricone's like Man with No Name, kind of stranger enters a town, and it's got that Western vibe to it, but it's still
Very
that kind
Western
of
vibe,
synthetic sci-fi flavor to it. So I think that's why it's such a melding of genres. When you're right to say like, is it horror? Because it's like, is it sci-fi? Is it a thriller? Is it a comedy? I don't really know. Like, it's a bit of everything.
Right. Like I try to always categorize prestige. Is it a sci-fi? Is it a drama?
Yeah.
Is it a western? Is it a psychological horror thriller? And
I'm such a monster guy. I'm going to go with horror anytime I see a monster.
Well, it's John Carpenter right now.
Yeah.
Right, but it's also an increment of why people want to talk about it, because there's so many avenues you can do. This is why we're talking about it.
Yeah. Well, in fact, there even was like, I want to bring it up purely as a discussion point, but Carpenter had to come out a couple years ago because there were neo-Nazis that were reading into the subliminal messaging thing and claiming that the movie was about Jewish people taking over the world. And Carpenter had to come out and say like, wow, what a reach, and like call them out for it and be like, everyone that was like, tons of people on this movie that were like friends of mine and people that helped me out were Jewish. They were not going to come out and say like, but he actually had to come out and say like, if you're stop assuming that.
Anti-Semitic, you always believe that you don't have the power they do.
I think that's kind of what that kind of a group would go into, is like, what can we think of as a conspiracy theory? And this is a movie that unfortunately is about a conspiracy theory. And
but it's just class warfare.
Yeah,
it's the oligarchs or rich people, and how you maintain poor with showing homeless people and a drifter who just wants a paycheck and just live a life alone. But then he's like, no, I got to deal with these people.
We get that very early on with Nato when he shows up at the work site and they're like, this is a union gig. So even there's a political aspect to the grunt work that he's going to do, is that he's got to get in with the union representative first before you can even start. Because it seems to me like he's kind of trying to stay off the grid. Well, unfortunately with this, he has to get in a little bit.
Which is so advanced nowadays, because try to get off the grid now.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. All the people that think we're being tracked have their cell phones in their pockets.
Yeah, so you're talking about a lot of class, which I think John Carpenter said he was so sick and tired of Reaganomics. This is why he wrote it, about just buy, and then you would just circulate stuff. And it's like, that's so stupid.
Yeah, he was one of the, I guess, most pronounced people in Hollywood that was calling out that kind of an aspect. And we're still seeing it decades later, how it hasn't really turned out the way that we were told it would turn out. That if you keep giving money to the rich guys, they'll siphon it down to the rest of you.
Right.
And so the movie, we're like, Carpenter was making this movie in the 80s right when it was going on.
If you just buy this, you'll feel good.
Yeah. Which, to be fair, I bought this movie so I would feel good one day. I remember being in the Walmart and picking this thing up because I was like, I've never seen this before and I'm having a bad day. So I felt good.
There's definitely a lot of male casting. It's definitely a macho kind of a masculine movie, but I won't say it's misogynistic. I don't think you actually do have a female character. She's kind of interesting. And
yeah, she's very complex, Meg Foster, in the film, because she isn't exactly. We're not really sure how to feel about her even until the finale of the movie.
No, right. You know? She's like a David Mamet character. Like, do you
yeah.
know you're good or bad? Play your cards out. Tell me right now.
And you could say she's one of the only people that beats Roddy Piper in a fight in this movie by throwing him out a literal window.
That's why I say it's not like misogynistic. It's not like, even though there's only like one female character.
Yeah, and she's never. I don't think she's really seen in like a romantic angle. There's a certain attraction, I would say.
Yeah.
But not really like we're gonna make this the blonde bombshell, like, you know, woman who's this guy's got to get with to save the world or anything like that. She's a very interesting, and I like Meg Foster. She was, of course, one of the standouts from like Masters of the Universe as Evil Lynn, you know, and then of course even doing.
Well, she had the eyes for it.
Yeah, she's got a very hypnotic.
That's not
gaze.
contact lenses. That's
no. She still looks that. She still looks that way. Decades later, she still has that piercing gaze, and it does really. Again, like, it almost feels like, contacts. So you're like, wait, is she one of them because of her eyes?
Yeah, right. Yeah, she's right. Yeah, but then, you know, Rodney's got to go out the window.
Yep.
Yeah, of course.
Happens to the best of us. Yeah.
Of course, right.
And this film actually paired up Alan Howarth doing the score with John Carpenter, which was not... I mean, Alan Howarth and him had worked together on things like some of the Halloween sequels. Yes. Howarth had just done in '88 Halloween 4, which was, of course, the first film that Carpenter washed his hands of. I don't want any Halloween anymore. That same year, Howarth did Halloween 4 and then teamed up with Carpenter on They Live. That's going to be a weird
conversation.
Yeah, so it's probably like, he was like, I heard your score. It was okay, I guess.
Yeah. That's why 88 was a great year, because then I think they advertised it also on commercials. He's back. Michael Myers is back. It's like, well, how can he be back? Right.
Yeah, so it was a very, like, dynamic thing, and maybe he rode that lightning to try and, you know, get his movie out with They Live. It's like, hey, they're talking about my guy again, so, like, let me bring this movie out.
Now, if I remember right, I think just because Halloween, you have to cut a check to John Carpenter to make the movie, even though he's not part of it or affiliated. You just have to give him money to do it, and then he used some of that money to finance this movie, if I remember right.
I think he got a very small sum. It's important to note, after that third movie, he was pretty much paid because his name was going to be in the credits, but it was like a small sum. He got more money for things like remakes later on, and because the original Halloween was done on a smaller budget, he had to reach out for a lot more help to kind of get the money that he needed to accrue it. So he doesn't have as much of a stake in that as he did. He has gained a lot more percentage of Halloween since then. Okay. Because people have kind of looked at, like, if I don't get his stamp of approval,
then nobody's going to watch it. Right, nobody's going to watch it.
Even though he'll come out later on and say he doesn't like your movie.
Probably. Right. But this feels inserted at the right time to talk about things that's a little bit ahead of its time. That's what's unique about it. It's very much stamped into 80s.
Yeah.
Professional wrestling and all that good and bad and, you know, monsters and everything. But it speaks of things that are happening now.
Yeah.
Sometimes people talk, it's more relevant now than it was back
then. I was thinking that every time I watch it, I feel like I connect with the ideals that he's playing with. I feel like they're more prescient now than they were then.
Yeah.
And again, that comes with being the kind of filmmaker he is a lot of his movies age like fine wines. A lot of his early stuff. I mean, Ghost of Mars probably isn't getting any
Prince
better,
of Darkness was trash when he came out, but I like it now.
Yeah.
I love it now. Yeah.
So I think that's kind of the key instrument, is that you can like his movies when they come out, but I find that I tend to love them more every time I watch them, and They Live as one of those movies. And it comes down to, like we were talking about the B-movie ideas, he used people in his crew that were very into the macho man action world. So, like, Gary Kibbe did the cinematography, who had done Escape from LA with him, who'd done RoboCop 3. Like, he had done kind of those, like, you know, the macho kind of character pieces.
Those 80s, like, action stuff. Yeah.
He had two editors, Gib James and Frank Jimenez, who both had just done Rambo 2. Which was, again, like, that took the Rambo 1 style of, like,
so
the quiet film to Rambo 2.
They worked together.
They were, two editors that I believe had worked together on that film.
Because sometimes when we say two editors, you get a first cut, and then somebody comes back and does it.
Unless Frank came in and fixed both movies.
Right. But I think they were, you're right.
I think they were a team editing group. But he did use those guys from a Rambo movie. So, like, he got that style that he wanted for his macho dude movie, and then placed the ideas in, to the point where Roddy Piper even said afterwards he respected John Carpenter. He didn't really believe in his politics in the movie, but he respected them enough to give his vision what he needed. So I think that's, you know, again, he's finding people that maybe don't always agree with him, but ones that kind of use the style.
But if you work with somebody, like, this is where we're winning, like we said, this is where we're winning, let's use what you have, let's show off your talents. And then there's not a lot of clever camera work. It's pretty much the action and stunts. You don't want to move the camera very much, and then you want to keep it, especially when you're walking the street and picking up magazines. It's just simple shot here and then shot here. So because you're working on the street, you don't want to waste time with cleverness.
Yeah, and like you said, with it probably being a more guerrilla shoot, you don't have time for setups because if someone starts getting alerted to it and people get called in and then you get in some trouble.
Yeah.
And I also think too, part of that had something to do with, I want to showcase what he's seeing in the real world, and then I have to showcase what he's seeing with the glasses on. It does make it a little bit easier if you're not moving the camera to have two versions of that shot. One that's the black and white obey and one that's the real world.
Yeah.
It's easier to do the editing in post. And again, if you're working with a smaller budget, dealing with a studio that doesn't really believe in your vision, you got to take the cuts you can, I guess.
Yeah. So I think overall it's a cheap, fast movie,
Mm-hmm.
but it has much more to say than you think it is, because it's the one of the things. It's the contradiction. You think it's going to be an '80s action movie or it's a horror movie, but it speaks more relevant now than it was then.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And you think it's going to be just some cheap knockoff, but it has some deep themes to it that you pay attention to.
Yeah. And again, it can be subliminal. Like, I think if you watch this movie without getting what he's doing, you can just have a fun time watching it too. This movie flows incredibly well. I was paying attention to the time codes watching it this last time. He doesn't get the glasses until a half hour into the movie. He doesn't meet up and have the fight until an hour in.
Just give him a jackhammer so show off your muscles.
Yeah, I realized, I was like, we're an hour in already? Like, what's going on? This movie flows incredibly well. It's entirely enjoyable, even if you didn't have the kind of commentary that he's playing with and the themes that he's rolling with. It could just be a very fun invasion flick. It's Invasion of the Body Snatchers in many ways, except we don't care about who the bodies are. But it's an excellent movie. I was really happy that we got a chance to talk about it today. I love the movie. It's not my top tier. I still got my Halloween and my In the Mouth of Madness, but I enjoy this one.
How many awesome '88 horror movies they are? It's still going to be like a top 5.
Yeah, and I think as far as Carpenter goes, him being one of my favorite directors,
in the '80s, it'll be a top 10.
Yeah, there's very few movies of his I dislike, but this one I truly adore. Yeah, Vampires on the lower end. His first and last movie, I'm not big on Dark Star and The Ward. I really wish he would come back and direct another movie so his last film isn't The Ward. But this one worked very well for me, right in that middle ground of perfect streak 80s Carpenter.
Yeah. So, have you seen They Live? Have you actually seen them?
Yeah. Do you wear glasses at night? Let us know your thoughts on the film down below. Let us know where this fits with your John Carpenter rankings. Do you put this one really high? I know a couple other people that really rank this in their top 2 Carpenter films really high up
it's
there.
Not going to surpass the thing for me.
Yeah, and that's kind of the beauty of that 80s realm of Carpenter, though, is everyone seems to come at it from a different angle. I would put this just barely under the thing. Just barely, but I can imagine a lot of people having their own thoughts on it as well. Are you interested in the potential remake that was announced back in 2011 that has yet to move forward?
They were going to do a
Matt
remake?
Reeves, director of The Batman, was attached to write and direct a remake of this film, and we haven't heard anything since 2011, so I'm not sure that's happening anymore. But would you watch it if it happened?
That would be really bizarre.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm not saying that as an insult. That'd be just really bizarre. I'm not saying that bad, good or bad.
If you were forced to put a wrestler in the movie, who should you put in? I feel like Chris Jericho, maybe. I don't want The Rock, who's been doing
No,
movies.
you have to do somebody that doesn't have a reputation for doing movies. Like I said, nowadays, John Cena, no. But you have to find somebody that doesn't have a reputation.
Bring in Chris Jericho. He worked with Kevin Smith a few times.
He's
got some time in the front of the camera, but I would watch it. I'm just not sure it would be as good. But then again, Matt Reeves makes everything perfect. So
nobody buys magazines anymore. He was looking at his iPad.
You're on your ads on your phone.
Ads on your phone. Constantly pop up. I want to watch my YouTube.
Yeah, that's fair. Yeah. So let us know your thoughts on the film down below. As Nick pointed out, go ahead and check out those links down in the description. Check out the Facebook, or check us out on Instagram and Twitter at Canon Film. And you can also check us out, guys. Check out the show every single week. We have new episodes Mondays, Thursdays,
and our Patreon
Saturdays, and the Patreon, which link is down in the description as well. You can get tiers as low as $1 a month, but by sacrificing one of your Caribou coffees every month, you can join the tier where you get to help us pick movies every single month that we do on the show.
Yeah,
it's easier for you to pick than us. We have a lot of movies to talk about.
Oh gosh, yes.
Yeah. So thank you guys for joining us once again. You can find all my film reviews at goatfilmreviews.com.
You can find my podcast, the St. Paul Filmcast, anywhere you find podcasts. And when we're done, I'm going to Jimmy Superfly Snook Kyle here.
Yeah, there you go. So obey, and we'll see you next time.